check, waiting for the connection, and let's go live. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, we're live. Welcome back to Real Cast Fishing. Your host, Glenn, with the City of Island Fishing Field Team, COAF Field Team on YouTube. And this round, what have I got for you? We're bringing you more from the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. And in this case, excuse me, we're going through tips 56 through 60. Plus, well, I got a little something related to yours truly's, I guess, addiction to fishing. But this case, it's ultralight bait casting, aka bait finesse systems fishing. And this year we had a little hiccup in trying to get our limit, or at least first fish of the year. It actually took us about 20 days into the year before we finally got our first fish, first limit. And we did it bait finesse systems fishing. But that said, it's fly casting, it's fly fishing that we're talking about in the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. We've got a ramblings piece there that we'll talk more of. But for now, let's go into the Little Red Book. Plus, I'll throw in that little video just to discuss some of these things, because once you get started bait finesse systems fishing, you may become very interested in it. So, more to come. All right, let's take us into the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, tips 56 through 60 this round. And we'll start off with tip 56. The difference between a good fisherman and a great one, a BB. Okay? I am getting a little buffering issue here on the podcast, so if it does hiccup a little, definitely have another one of these posted from the recording, so you shouldn't be able to miss anything. All right, so let's go right into it. The difference between a good fisherman and a great one, a BB. Excuse me. I've never met an angler who doesn't like or respect Pat Dorsey. For those of you who do not know Pat, he is hands down the hot stick guide on the trout rivers closest to Denver, namely the highly technical Cheeseman Canyon section of the South Platte River, the Dream Stream section of the Platte up in South Park, the Williams Fork of of Colorado near Kremling, and pretty much anywhere else he chooses to guide. He literally wrote the book on fly fishing the South Platte. The fact that Pat is almost uniformly recognized as the best guide in one of the busiest trout fishing regions in America is a tall praise. Despite that, he remains humble, hardworking, and amazingly open with his bag of tricks. The most important lesson he ever shared came on a crowded day near Deckers, one of those days when conditions were challenging, the fish were stubborn, and the place was packed with so many anglers. We simply didn't have the option of bouncing from one run to the next. We had to make do with the water right in front of us. Pat tied on a double nymph rig with an RS2 and a Black Beauty. 3 casts and nothing. Pat suggested we had a fuzz more weight to the rig. A few more casts and nothing still. I suggested we switch flies as we renewed the run. We were working held fish. Maybe they just didn't like our flies. No, insisted Pat. We'll add a little more weight. Several more casts, nothing. He had another BB, and 2 casts later we tied into a hefty brown trout. That fish had been there all along. We never switched fly patterns. What we did was find the right weight balance that made those flies finally drop perfectly into the trout's feeding zone. It was an offer the fish ultimately could not refuse. Weight, said Pat, is the most important factor. Excuse me. Weight, said Pat, is the most important factor when you are fishing with nymphs. I might cast 100 times with different flies, but if the weight isn't right, it won't work. When the weight is right, the fly will almost always work. Think about the next time you're frustrated at the edge of a run you know that holds trout. Think about your weight before switch fly patterns. It's probably worth 10 weight adjustments before any single fly change, especially when you are casting at educated and challenging trout. After all, Pat explained, the difference between a good fisherman and a great one is often no more than a BB. All right, a good one, signed KD. I believe that's Kevin Dieter, who is co-author of the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. I like this one. Difference between one BB. As it turns out, I've fished places where I could see the trout. I could see them lurking down below, and I could see my fly going above them and just getting ignored. And I did have the tendency to maybe switch the fly, but when I could especially see that my fly's not even getting into the money zone where the trout are lurking, this comes pretty much into play. So I like this. Between, excuse me, a good fly fisherman, etc., is a BB. Well, keep that in your back pocket. Tip 56 from the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. Okay, let's go on to tip 57. Let me stop here real quick and take a little coffee break here. Oh yeah, gotta have some morning cup of java. It's let's see, we're over here in Texas. It's about 6:30 in the morning. I started the podcast early today because, well, it's supposed to rain later, and I believe I got some honeydews that I gotta knock out that call for me to be, well, elsewhere. So let's knock this podcast out and let's get some of these tips out so that y'all can pick up some more great suggested tips from the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. One more sip of a cup of java and we'll begin with tip 57. Tasty. Okay, tip 57. A knockout with a bolo punch. Think of it as the ultimate risk reward, only this time the scale tips heavily for the reward. The subject is multiple flies, 3 for the sake of this discussion. We all know the risk is wildly spinning gaggle of hooks that become more precarious with any addition of weight to the line. Cast improperly, it's like the gaucho's bolo just waiting for a tangle. Done correctly may be the most deadly method for fishing stream when there's no clearly defined hatch. Start with a bushy, buoyant, dry fly on the surface, then drop down to a weighted attractor nymph at the depth you think the best fish will be holding. Use a finer tip about 10 inches along, a small nymph that imitates primary subsurface insect. Get this down to the fish and watch your success rate climb. The dry fly serves primarily as an indicator, but don't be surprised if it gets a few grabs along the way. As for avoiding snarls, let the line drift all the way downstream and use a river load rather than a bag cast. Never allow the line to decelerate on the forward cast. Signed CM. That's Charlie Meyer. Again, co-author of the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. Okay, keep that one in your back pocket. This is talking about a dry fly acting as an indicator, your money zone fly, where as the trailing fly, and then up the line from that is a little small nymph, sort of like a subsurface insect that's going to be lingering between the water columns. And just making sure that when you cast it, use a water load instead of your typical back cast, and making sure that it's drifting so the line does not go forward of your forward cast, and you should be good to go. And well, I've used 3 flies before. I don't think I've gone over 3 flies, and I do have to say that it is true that you will get some hits in that money zone, but you will get that occasional hit on that dropper or that dry fly that's acting as an indicator. So hey, kudos, tip 57. Keep that one in your back pocket. All right, let's go to tip 58. Seeing the light. Deep evening shadows had descended on the canyon that cradles the lower Arkansas River before it spills out onto the Colorado's southeastern plains. The small blue-winged olive dryfly, so popular with the river's resident browns, had faded from sight in the growing darkness. Excuse me. The angler's offering no longer should be distinguished among the frequent rises to naturals. Don Puterbaugh, a river guide for 30 years, had the perfect solution. He rigged a larger white-winged dry fly a couple of feet ahead of that tiny mayfly imitation, providing a perfect directional arrow to the target. Trout ignored the big fly while rarely eating the small one, which now was easy to locate. The angler enjoyed splendid action almost until dark. All right, signed CM. All right, let me just go back real quick and just see. Seeing the light and about the dropping evening shadows. So here it's just basically adding a high visible dry fly, not meant to catch fish, but mainly to give you an indicator as to where you've cast and where your fly is that you are actually fishing, attempting to get a trout. So I like this. Definitely have come into play even when it hasn't been dark. It's just when I'm using some small midges that's very hard to see. Put in that sort of an indicator fly ahead of the fly I'm actually fishing has helped out. So, hey, another great suggestion. It's a tip from the Red Book of Fly Fishing. Okay, let's go on to the next tip. Let's see. Number 59, the thin, clear line. Lew Wolf called it far and away the most significant invention in angling history. No, he wasn't talking about the graphite rod or plastic-coated fly line or even leak-proof waders. The foremost creation he determined is monofilament, or as it pertains to fly fishing, the ultra-fine tippet material that gives us the ability to deceive even the shyest of fish. A seemingly unending progression of polymers now enable us not only to employ absurdly fine tippets, almost invisible in the water, but also to imitate almost microscopic flies. The principal benefit comes in the ability to fish successfully in those difficult places and conditions that hold the most desirable trout. Flash forward to a western tailwater in the mid-January. As a hedge against extreme cold, an angler has pre-rigged with 5X and size 22 midge larvae to imitate the insects prevalent at this time and place. His companion, more savvy at this location, has tied a number 26 midge to a 6X. An hour later, the finer offering has produced half a dozen good trout. The angler with the bigger flies and line has caught nothing. That could be definitely frustrating. Risking frostbitten fingers, the frustrated angler adds a length of 6 excuse me, a length of 6X and a smaller fly. He catches a nice trout on the next cast. While a slender, flexible tippet helps to avoid spooking fish, especially when attached to a tiny fly, the greater benefit lies in allowing flies to move naturally in the current. This is particularly true in clear, slow-moving water. With a bit of practice playing fish, the notion of tying a tiny fly to a 6X tippet no longer should bring trepidation. Just more bites. Signed, CM. Okay, that was tip 59. Almost done with this round. We got tip 60 coming next. But one thing to take away from this one about being these polymers and these really thin tippets and clear tippets, I like this portion here where they were talking about the hedge against extreme cold, where the angler pre-rigged his flies on some tippet and the fly. Excuse me. I probably has happened to a lot of our listeners is cold temps, below freezing, your hands, your fingers feel like thumbs, you can barely feel anything, and you want to change your fly, and it turns out you're using a little tiny size 20, 22, 26 little fly. It sure would have been nice to have one pre-tied already and ready to go, so if I can just switch back and forth as needed. So, hey, a hidden tip in tip 59. Pre-rig your flies for those cold weather days. Okay, let's go and switch over to the last tip in this round. This is called Live With It. Tip 60 out of the Red Book of Fly Fishing. You see a trout rising in a river with consistent, steady gulps. You wade into position for a cast, make the perfect false cast, let fly, and pow! A gust of wind tosses that dry fly 2 feet left of what you thought would be the perfect shot, just outside the fish's feeding lane. What do you do? If you're like most people, you want to give it another shot. You quickly load up and try it again. Bad call. Live with it, said Missouri River guide Pete Cardinal. After that scene played out for us one afternoon, if you make a bad cast, let your fly float out of that trout's range of vision, then go again, but not before. to miss even by a little. There's nothing wrong with letting the fly slide behind a trout before casting it again. And more importantly, there's everything wrong with the whirling, splashing, slurping racket of a frustrated caster ripping slightly off-target fly from the periphery of a feeding fish. It takes practice and discipline, believe me. You make a mistake, and you want to try again. That's human nature. But there are no do-overs in trout fishing. The sooner you learn to accept what happened, good or bad, and adapt your thinking to what might happen next, that's when you become a better angler. Watch that fish the next time, rip it away, and the show's over. Let it ride, and you're still in business. All right. So those were tips 56 through 60 in this episode. I do like this one as well. Tip 60 from Kevin Dieter. In this case, hey, you just made a bad cast, and instead of just ripping it away and spooking the fish, go ahead and live with it and just kind of let it continue down until it's out of the range of the fish's vision, and then recast. Hey, sounds like common sense to me, but hey, I've been guilty as well. All right. So that's it for the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. But we've got a little plus. I mentioned at the beginning of the this round, I was going to bring up Bait Finesse Systems Fishing, aka ultralight bait casting. And well, let's talk about that real quick. Well, what I'll do is I'll show a video of yours truly heading out to a local pond to do some trout fishing, and as I'm going through there, I'll just discuss what I have in the video, and then for those listening on the podcast, I'll describe it in more detail so that you can kind of picture it in your mind, possibly while you're on your morning commute headed out to the day job, like a lot of us have to deal with. But before we go there, let's have a little cup of coffee. This is a new blend that my daughter gave me for Christmas. It's like a religious coffee. And what was funny on the bag, it says coffee with a purpose. All right, let me take you to the video. All right, it'll start out with yours truly heading out to this little pond up the road from us, up in Denison, Texas. And I'm showing a Feather Flight Kingfisher BFS reel, and it's on the Handing Magic L 6-foot ultralight bait casting rod. And I have a trout magnet on. I did bring some other lures as well, to include a fishing fly that I'm going to use to hopefully catch a fish this round as well. Because the cool thing about this is this rod has the ability, or this combo has the ability to cast a 1 gram lure using traditional bait casting gear that you would use possibly bass fishing. It's just more highly specialized gear. It's got a really light spool, and it has these brakes that'll help slow it down so it prevents the backlash. And the other piece is it's very light, I guess, action, so you're able to help toss that or cast that fly, or in this case, trout magnet, much easier. And here I'm getting my first fish in the video, and I didn't cast very far, only about 30 feet or so, but it's easily casting, and I'm having to adjust the brake occasionally as it was below freezing, and I guess you got to make some adjustments there. Additionally, because I got the wind blowing in my face, that little wind as it gusts here or there will also affect the cast, so I had to make some adjustments as well. And so here I'm showing that I have a trout. It's on a trout magnet. and explaining a couple of things, how fast I'm able to cast. In this case, it's or retrieve, how far it's going. I'm casting about mid pond, which I would say is maybe about 40, 50 feet. In my initial retrieve, I was casting it out, letting it sink, and doing a slow retrieve. And that was working well. And then I went and did the same thing, but started doing a little twitchy retrieve. Just a little twitch, just enough to get them started. And that seemed to work well. And then in the end, the no retrieve. Just cast it out and just let it drift down to where the trout were lurking, and I was getting strikes there. The water was really clear. I could actually see trout chasing my lure, in this case that trout magnet. And, well, it was definitely a fun trip. I'm going to go and jump, excuse me. I'm going to see if I can jump over to, let's see. Okay. This one is where I've switched over and put on a producer fishing fly. And I kind of weighed it so it'd be about 1.1 grams. So a little bit heavier than the trout magnet. And I definitely got that one out there. Actually, that's the trout magnet. Let me see if I can jump over some more. There's a trout that I'm showing. Measured about maybe 10 inches or so. And let's see. I want to make sure I get you to the point where... Yeah, here we go. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I've cast out this fishing fly, and I missed the strike. I'm casting out again. Again, it's a fishing fly, weighing about 1.1 grams, and I'm bringing them in now. And this one, I noticed, because it was heavier than the trout magnet, I had to do a more steady retrieve compared to just letting it drift down. But what was nice to know is it is possible to cast fishing flies, light lures on this ultralight casting setup. And I guess that's the main takeaway that I wanted to give you is there are a whole bunch of different ways to catch a fish. And, well, yours truly doesn't just focus on fly fishing. Most recently, bait finesse has been one that I've been playing around with. Also, hand line fishing. And then I do have a couple of center pin combos over here in the corner that I'll probably take those out later on during the year as well. I'm trying to work a couple of areas where I know there's some striped bass lurking over there by Texoma and the tail race at Denison, where I'm pretty certain I could do a dead drift floating, be it a lure, bait, doesn't matter. Believe I can get some nice stripers using that center pin reel setup. So, hey, stay tuned. When the weather gets warmer, you'll surely be out there trying to get some striped bass as well. All right. So appreciate y'all joining today. This was the Real Cast Fishing Podcast. Your host, Glenn, with the City Valley Fishing Field Team. We talked of tips 56 through 60. The next one that we go through, we'll take it on through 61 to 65. We'll just do them in increments of 5. Also, we'll probably put a little fishing ramblings discussion coming up in the next week or so, just to give us a little break and just reading the information coming from a book. But hopefully I find this, or you find this helpful, and hopefully there's some of these tips work for you when you're out there fly fishing. And definitely do reach out to us at, well, you can see on our YouTube channel some contact information, as well as check out realcastfishing.net. That'll take you off to our blog, and you can see some information there that we passed in them, or that we posted in the past. All right, all for now. Next time we'll catch you later, and good luck and good fishing.